I often get a question about the political effectiveness of Anonymous, and this is a question that's posed, variably by journalists, by students, by critics, and supporters. And I think that there's very different ways to measure their success and their importance. But one void that they fill is they report on events or issues that are ignored by the mainstream media. And once Anonymous starts to get involved and report on them, then the mainstream media jumps in. And then there's a kind of very symbiotic relationship between the mainstream media and Anonymous. And over the years, there were certain moments where this became very apparent. So, for example, when the Tunisian protests were occurring in January of 2011, there were a couple of extremely tepid articles coming out of Reuters and other news establishments that, if anything, were even minimizing the protests. And Anonymous, on the other hand, was getting video footage from activists on the ground and giving it to, for example, Al Jazeera and other news organizations and saying, actually, it's a little bit more significant than is being reported in the mainstream media. And at a certain point, in part because of the footage they were shuttling out of the country, there was a bit more reportage coming. This is something, again, I've seen time and again. Another really good example of this, and it's now a slightly different one, a slightly different dynamic, has to do with a number of rape cases that Anonymous got involved in North America. And the first of these occurred in Steubenville, Ohio, an industrial town in the middle of the United States. And there was a really wonderful New York Times article about the case, showcasing some of the young football players who were going to trial, outlining what had happened allegedly at the time, which was a sexual assault at a party with a young woman who had been very inebriated, and there had been a lot of footage that was shot, like videos and images. And what's interesting about that case was the New York Times did excellent reporting. It was really kind of a stellar article. But as happens with so much mainstream reporting, it's one dose and it goes away, and we never hear about it again. And someone anonymous decided that this was an issue that he wanted to take on. He started a Twitter account. It garnered a lot of support. And this case went from a single issue reported once in a national newspaper to an event that was followed by the nation. And then the issue of rape became a national discussion as well. And so they really changed the game, even though they got involved after the fact. Now, what's interesting, too, about Anonymous is that in some ways they're just a condensed and potent actor in relation to a new internet context, which can also push the mainstream media to report on different issues. And I think we saw this over the summer of 2014, where there was the conflict between Israel and Gaza. And the reporting, the mainstream reporting, really changed after the reporting that came from basically folks on the ground who were then relaying the information on Twitter, and then that was amplified by Twitter supporters. And Anonymous was one participant, but in some ways a very minor one. And so really the game has kind of changed because of social media. And then Anonymous is particularly adept at harnessing the power of social media to force mainstream media to report or to continue to report on an issue, because they actually coordinate with each other. There's teams, they go on reconnaissance missions, they have propaganda, they have a plan, And so it's one of the reasons why they're particularly adept, although the trend is also one in which participants on social media can, under the right circumstances, force the mainstream media to report on that which they either ignore or just, only lightly report on.